Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Susan Trin from the Populo marketing team. Thank you for tuning into our webinar today, How Internal Comms Can Make or Break HR and Change Initiatives. A couple of housekeeping notes. We are currently on the Zoom platform, and you may use the Q&A panel on your console to enter questions and then use the chat function for all other comments. We really encourage you to engage with our speakers and each other throughout the conversation. We'll save time at the end to get to as many questions as possible from the Q&A panel. And yes, we will be sending the recording out to all attendees after the webinar. Now, I'm looking forward to today's discussion. Businesses are facing an uncertain economy and fast pace of change that requires all of them to transform to keep up. Our speakers today will dive into the top challenges that HR and transformation professionals are facing this year and how an integrated communication strategy plays a key role in solving these challenges. Communications is the connector between all parts of an organization to drive key business initiatives, which is a core focus for Populo in supporting their partners and customers. So who is Populo? Populo is the leading communications and workplace experience software company. At Populo, we connect the people you need to reach with the right message across multiple channels like email, digital signage, mobile, intranet, and more, all from a single platform. And once those comms are deployed, our robust AI-driven analytics help ensure relevancy, increased engagement, and boosted productivity. Populo's Harmony platform sets the standard in how technology can connect people, systems, and ways of working to deepen relationships and help organizations move forward. Today, we serve over 6,000 customers across 80 countries, including nearly half of the Fortune 100. And now we want to move on to our main feature, our speakers. We're so lucky to have leaders from Syngenta and International Feed Corporation on our panel today. I will now turn it over to our moderator, Andrew, to introduce himself.
Thanks so much, Suze. Pleasure to be here and to host the conversation today. As you can see from the slide, my name is Andrew Hubbard. I'm based in Cambridgeshire in the UK, and my role is I lead on internal communications and engagement here at Populo. I've been here since October. It's a really fantastic place to be, great time to be part of the organisation, and really keen to get into a conversation today with experts in HR and change, and try and talk about how we are the golden thread between both of those to make stuff happen. Of course, I would say that as an internal communicator, wouldn't I? But that's enough about me. Let's hand you over to the other speakers. Rachel first. Tell us who you are, Rachel, where you're based, and what you're all about.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Andrew. I appreciate that. Excited to be here this Wednesday morning. My name is Rachel Brownlee. I am the Human Resources Manager with International Feed Corporation. We are a trading company out of Minnesota. Prior to this, I was with Cargill for 10 years and in various HR roles within their beef industry. So that's who I am and what I'm all about, Andrew. I'm just super pleased to be here and seeing everybody shining and happy faces.
Love that. Great to have you, Rachel. Ricardo, tell us all about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew and Rachel. Nice to be with you both and everyone else on the line. Yeah, so as it says there, I lead Center of Excellence around change and org development for Syngenta, a large agricultural company based here in Switzerland, where I am. Prior to that, this is my third continent, fourth country, so I've moved around a bit. Prior to this, I was in management consulting for a couple of decades, always in the same space of change and leadership and org development. In previous life, engineering, but it's quite a long time ago. So yeah, excited to lean into this conversation.
Love that, Ricardo. Love that our voice on change has gone through a fair few changes yourself, which is a great story to tell. I think we've got 3 time zones represented then in the speaker panel here, and many more, I think, on the attendee list. So thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll dive straight into the conversation. So today, as we said, we want to talk about how internal communications can make or break HR and change initiatives. Loads going on in the world at the moment. You don't really need to turn on the news these days to know that change is constant, and with the uncertain economic times and the macro challenges that we're all facing in our respective industries and businesses, I think it's very safe to say that we've never been busier in our three respective professions. So I think what we'll do is we'll go through and talk about what some of the biggest challenges are that we're facing today in both HR, in transformation, but also in internal communications. And then we'll go on to have a bit of a deep dive then around how we think internal comms can help solve those challenges, what we need to do to be a constructive, trusted advisor and partner while we're facing off those challenges. We'll make sure there's plenty of time at the end as well to have Q&A from our attendees, and I think also we're going to get the panelists here to get their crystal ball out and perhaps look the next 5-10 years in the future and talk about what those trends or initiatives and challenges that we face today might look like in the future as well. So without further ado, let's talk. Rachel, I'm going to pick on you first. Let's talk about the top challenges that you've seen, I guess, and over the past few years in the HR space, and what's keeping you up at night at the moment.
Yeah, thanks for that, Andrew. I really like what you say about change. I mean, I think it's Dr. Seuss one of those that says the only constant is change. It's probably not Dr. Seuss, but love what you said about that. And I think that's been so true for the past 3 to 4 years. It feels like it's hard to have a discussion about any of this without talking about the darn pandemic, right? I mean, it's just something that I personally feel like it was a catalyst for so much changes within the workplace and the workforce and expectations. So, to your question about, what are the challenges that we're facing, and I'm personally facing in the HR world is certainly how do we retain people, right? Expectations have shifted and changed and look so different than they were even 1 year ago. Again, it's hard to have a conversation about retention and hiring without saying, okay, what is your work schedule? Or, do you have a hybrid schedule? Do you have a flex schedule? What does that look like? And then on the flip side of that, what's important to the people out there? The workforce is speaking pretty clearly about what's important to them, right? People, I think I was working with a recruiter at one point, and she said 80% of job seekers are looking for a remote, work setting, or at least a hybrid. So, and then you have the needs of the business, right? So those two things are not always jiving. And so how do you not only retain the great people that you have today, because their expectations have shifted, but also, start to really recruit those people out there for the positions that are coming. On that note, I would also add that I think you touched on this too, Andrew, is that what is the market going to be doing, Q2, Q3, Q4, we keep hearing all these predictions about what is going to happen in the world. And everybody's a bit on the edge of their seat, right? We're all like, okay, when is it going to come? Is it going to be a recession? Is it not going to be, and so obviously if we're in the seats that we're in today and we're having those thoughts, our workforce is certainly feeling a bit uneasy as well. What is the state of the corporation or business that I'm working in? And, is this a safe place to be? Is my job safe? So just dealing with a lot of uncertainty out there. And so as leaders, our job is to reach those people, and how do we make them feel like, hey, you're good. This is a great place for you. You can support your life, your family, your friend, your lifestyle while working here. And so, that's what's keeping me up at night besides my kids.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel your pain there, Rachel. That's interesting. So I was taking some notes while you were talking there. I've captured 3 R's: retention, remote working, and recession. Let's dive into those in a minute, but I do have an immediate question on the recession point. Is recession good or bad for attrition? If we're staring down the barrel of quite a big global recession, is that kind of good news for HR in the sense that people might kind of hunker down and go, I'm not going anywhere, it's about any port in a storm kind of thing, or actually does it kind of not matter?
Yeah, I love that question, Andrew. My goodness. Oh gosh, I'm gonna give the classic HR answer. It depends,
Of course, yeah.
Everyone loves that. They're like, oh, for God's sakes. So recession, certainly the businesses, I would say business leaders talk about it like, okay, well then that should draw and attract people, right? Unemployment goes up. That should attract and make it easier to recruit and hire people. However, so I think I don't think recession's good in any way, but I do think from a business perspective, that's how it's looked at. And then on the flip side, it's that uncertainty that we're talking about, right? Like, is this organization, is this going to be an okay place? Are we going to, as margins get tighter, as the market is kind of doing somersaults, and all of this is unprecedented, right? We've got the COVID factors, we've got the baby boomers who are leaving the workforce, and I'm throwing a lot of factors in there. But what I'm saying is that can cause some unease, right? And so it's making people, how can we make people feel stable? So I think that's sort of that can be the opportunity or hard part of a recession in my mind, because business really buckles down, right? I know in my time at Cargill it was hunker down, and there's all these taglines that come into place, and depending on where you're sitting, you're like, what does that mean? Is that okay? Am I safe? Is this an okay place? And even, in large organizations like Cargill, that certainly is a question. I just add in, we're all seeing the layoff stuff, right? I mean, it's on LinkedIn, it's every place. So, yeah, so I'm going to go back to, it depends, Andrew. Depends on where you're looking. Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of factors in there, and I think it's interesting because reflecting on the other R's that we talked about there. So retention. I think looking at a recent report from the recent HR executive survey, 72% of HR pros saying that they are somewhat or extremely concerned about losing talent this year. And then on the other point around remote, I think that the stat that really jumps out is a Gartner report that basically said, look, 75% of employees want more options for flexible work, and no one's getting that right, are they? No one's kind of nailed hybrid yet. I do see job adverts, certainly here in our market in the UK, more and more that are kind of, we expect you 2 days in the office, we expect you 3 days in the office. And that kind of clarity is good. But actually in practice, it's probably not working that way. And even when people are going to the office, are they just there for the sake of being there? Or they're there for the right reasons, are they collaborating? So I think those 3 R's that we talked about, there's a lot of question marks around them all. And to use your wonderful phrase there, it all depends, right? Yeah. But it's key. That's what's keeping Rachel up. Okay, Ricardo, over to you. Let's talk change, and we'll get into all of these topics in a minute and how we think IC can perhaps support. Ricardo, what's keeping you up at night when it comes to change?
Yeah, I mean, I think, obviously Rachel covered some ground there, and I think hit the key ones. If I had to pick two, one overlapping, it's certainly talent and culture, right? On talent, it's, the ability, how are we looking across entire life cycle, right? And this is, from the branding concerns before someone joins, through the joining and experience, and even, post leaving, right? Ambassadorship as we take on increasingly bigger social purposes in organizations, right? It's important to not only have a good experience while you have an employee working with you, and of course, retainment becomes a concern, but it's, how will they speak about you after they've left, right? And so I think, attracting the right talent, ensuring the right experience throughout their time with you, and then moving on to wherever else they go, that they continue to be ambassadors for their brand. So each of those have their challenges, and we can certainly talk about them. But how do you do that well, and how do you do that at scale? Right, continues to be an issue. And then the other one, culture. A lot of the points, even Rachel, you were making. If you look at culture's always been a concern for organizations, of course. Do you shift the culture? Do you just shepherd it along its way? Do you help nudge and evolve it in towards your purpose and values in alignment with your corporate strategy, right? So with all the things in a couple of years that we've seen, you mentioned hybrid distributed workforces, which aren't necessarily a new thing, but have accelerated and amplified over the last couple of years. And you'll see a ton of work out there around, can you really build a culture while you're on Zoom and you're, distributed across multiple locations without being, in the office. Some companies are betting that you cannot, right? And forcing people back in. And we know what's happening in some of those cases with, people looking for more flexibility and not standing for that. Other companies made early bets in COVID and said, no, we're going to go ahead and let people, work from wherever they want, and then reel it back, a few years, after the pandemic, or after, I'm not sure that's the right word, but, as the time goes on, and these are sometimes missteps that start, eroding some of the trust. So, how do you actively think about, measure, and then look at the cultural attributes that you need to either dial up in these new times, or certainly support, again, in connection to the user experience, which drives some of the talent growth and retention. So, so I think that, these are the two areas that I would probably put most of my focus in, and I, as it turns out, am putting most of my focus in.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. It's a challenging time, and to hear those 2 points around talent and culture, I think we'll stick with you, Ricardo, as we move on to kind of, bringing IC into the conversation here, and then we'll circle back, Rachel, and talk about some of those points around, retention, remote, and the recession. Ricardo, let's cast our minds into an imaginary world where you and me have just started working together. You're leading on change, and my job as an internal communicator is to help you get absolutely everything you need to make it a success. What do we do on day one as part of that relationship to tackle some of those issues that you talked about that are keeping you up at night? What does a good IC partner look like to a change management pro like yourself?
Yeah, that's, if I thought about it, I guess, one of the key things in you see it in change, you see it everywhere, and we tend to fall in love with solutions, right? In the case of change, we're putting in a new system, a new process, whatever the change happens to be. Where I think really it should be about falling in love with the problem, right? What's the challenge? What is it that we're after? So I think it would be, from the very beginning, and very often, and we have this issue in change where the focus on change doesn't come on to the program or project until later than it should, and you're already, digging sand out of the hole that you're creating. Now, with internal comms and change, it's the same thing. They go part and parcel together. So it really is about early connections around what exactly is the vision here, which again continues to be difficult when we're really leaning into emergent change, right? Which is, we're not quite, it used to be every methodology and change was similar, crystal clarity on the vision, and then you go from there. Well, with a lot of these changes, think about sustainability, ESG concerns, certainly digital shift as we're leaning into some of these AIs that are growing exponentially. The future vision is emergent at best, right? So it's really incumbent on this change comms partnership to start very early on, really get an understanding of, what is it that we're going to be doing and how are we going to be working together, and then bring in the strengths where they make sense, right? If you think about internal comms, it really is about understanding of channels and audience, and getting that, real color on what those channels to market are, especially as we democratize communications channels. I mean, you're clearly more of an expert on there, but using all the social media aspects that we have internal to, whether it be Yammer or Slack, so that's what I think IC brings to the table. And then from the change side, it really starts becoming, how do we start shaping that potential emergent vision? And then the one place, if you look at a Pareto where we absolutely overlap in, is stakeholders, right? The key to understanding the landscape, seeing how the change goes to an organization, is really understanding of these stakeholder groups. And I'm defining it, I guess, in a traditional change sense of anyone who will be impacted or can impact the outcome of any change. And much like HR and Rachel, of course, internal communications is in every single part of the business. So they have really good close relationships with the business stakeholders across and externally as well. So really making sure that you partner together, but you're clear on who's bringing what value to the discussion.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I completely agree, Ricardo. I think, from my perspective in internal communications, there's two kind of crossroads where we would engage with the kind of change and transformation leads. The bad one is when it's already started. If changes are, they already know what they're trying to solve, and we haven't been part of that conversation. And the data insights they've got maybe haven't taken in the full consideration of everything that we've got access to, even if that's just reach across channels, right? We know who accesses this content here, we know who doesn't. And therefore, if we're trying to change that group, this is what we can do with that group. The better crossroads is we are going to try and solve a problem. Here's a business problem we've got. This is the solution we think is going to work. And at that point, if we're engaged at that moment, that's when we can go, great, let us get some sentiment for you. Let's create a benchmark of where we are, because understand a business challenge, right? That's absolutely, whether that's, something to do with the bottom line or whatever it might be, transformation and integration from 20 systems into one, whatever it might be. But getting that input and the audience insight from day one is where I think we can add the most value, I think. I think the other opportunity, to your point, is also getting, not just getting the message out to audience groups and working across that kind of stakeholder mapping together, but really tracking it properly. We've moved on so far over the past sort of 7 to 10 years when it comes to measurement. Measurement just used to be, have people got the message, right? And now it's are people getting the message? And by that, I mean, do they understand? And we've got more and smarter ways now of being able to track that on a regular basis. And I'm delighted that I'm at this point in my career at this time in kind of the technological evolution of comms, that we can see that stuff happening, because it makes the conversations we're having a lot more productive, because we're focusing on to what you said, the point you made around what are we trying to achieve, what change are we trying to affect. So I think that's where we can add value. And listen, we did get a question actually while you were talking there, from Richard Treadwell, who said, and I'll pose this to you now, and just to say, from anyone else, if you've got any questions as you go along, please do bring them in. We'll try and answer them as we go, but there is a section at the end for Q&A as well. So feel free to ask in the chat as we're going along. So Ricardo, question from Richard: how are the panel thinking about helping people through change, given the impact of the past few years? Are there any new approaches emerging?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the fundamental aspects here, I think, is people think that on average we fear change. And I don't think we do. I think people are uncomfortable with the unknown, but, everything in our lives is ultimately about change, right? Over the last couple of years, what's happened with, further decentralization, with hybrid working from home, is, we lose that connection sometimes with our colleagues, where we have these conversations that sometimes fill in the gaps, right, in the hallway, over lunch. So over time now, what we're seeing is, unless it's an official communication, they're not quite always filling in the blanks that they might have in the past. So I think, back to the question on new approaches, I think what we've gotten better, and you talked about it a little bit here, Andrew, and in a time in our kind of digital evolution where we're getting better about some of these tools. And for me, that one is really employee listening and employee sentiment analysis, right? We're able now to not just land these massive surveys every couple of years, but really get closer to always on listening and understanding where our particular employees or employee groups are at on any given change, and really getting the sense of sentiment, and then you can get into org network analysis and all kinds of tools. But the point is that I think what's improved over time is our ability to reach and understand individual employees at scale. And I think that's something that's quite different.
No, I'd agree with that. Rachel, what do you think? Anything in the HR space in terms of new approaches emerging to help people through change?
Yeah, I think I really, just hearing I'm taking away some ideas as well, by the way. So I think back to the question that was originally asked about with this unprecedented, over the past couple of years, what new approaches. I think it's fair to say that we're all figuring it out right now. I think if I've seen a shift in leadership, it has just been in being really vulnerable and allowing that space for people to be vulnerable when the changes continue to come. And I think that's been, I think you hit on it a bit there, Ricardo, understanding and empathizing with employee sentiment and how those feelings are happening. Businesses, we move fast, and change is always there, and it's not always, doesn't always feel okay to be vulnerable and have that space to say, oh my God, like, I really don't understand what's going on. My personal life is really hard because I've been cooped up for 3 years, so those aren't super tactical things, but I think what I've seen, our approach has definitely been a focus on people's well-being. So keeping the personal, having a pretty direct approach to people's personal well-being, and with the intent, and it being really intentional that when they're coming to work, that's equipping them with the tools and resources to deal with these changes. So, and in addition to that, looking at how we're talking about these things in the workplace, right? So what is the communication going out to the workforce? And so that can be something as simple as an email, but each email and each form of communication is going to hit each level in the organization differently. So we've really had to shift and be like, okay, who's our audience here? I think that when we're talking about change in communication, it's really important. I think it's part of human nature for people to look at and say, okay, how does this impact me? Right? It's not, most people aren't going to say, okay, let's look at it from this super broad perspective on how the business is operating. People say, oh my God, it's really scary because I think that this is going to make my job a lot harder. Or, so I think, Ricardo, you mentioned a little bit about fear, right? Are humans afraid of change? I'm with you. I don't think that it's fear. I think change, I think it's just that maybe that apprehension and lack of understanding of what it is. And so that's when our leaders have to really get good at being empathetic, having open doors when that communication goes out, and following up and really being able to gauge, did that land, right? And how did it land? So I don't know that it's necessarily anything groundbreaking, but I've seen a lot of leaders talk about things I never thought that they would. So setting that example, is key.
I'd agree with that. And I think there has been a bit of a step change when it comes to kind of authenticity and empathy from leadership. So, in answer to the question, I don't think this is groundbreaking. I don't think it's a new approach, but I think the things we can learn and take with us going forward are, really putting the kind of the human audience focus at front of mind with anything we're delivering, really, whether that be a HR change initiative or anything from the internal comms space. Rachel, let's stick with you. Let's go back to some of those points we talked about earlier and how we think internal comms might be able to help. We talked about retention, we talked about the recession, we talked about remote working. Maybe let's stick with remote working, hybrid working, because again, I don't think this is something that anyone's cracked yet. I'm not seeing amazing case studies flying out left, right, and centre and going, "Hey, let's do that." I was at a conference in November, and I heard about something that sounded pretty interesting. It was called Wednesday Plus One. So the company basically said, "Let's get everyone in on a Wednesday, and then one more day." They choose the day. That way they can maybe spend more time with their teams on a Monday or whatever they want to do. But Wednesday's the day everyone's in. That's when we'll do the town hall. That's when we'll do this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And that was the one thing I heard that was like, oh, I wonder how that's going. So I must check in on that one. But otherwise, how can we help in that space? When you guys are working hard on recruiting, how can we bring to life a really good hybrid experience for people wherever they are, at home, in the office, commuting to the office, whatever it might be?
Oh man, that's a great question.
Come on, fix it for us.
Fix it now. No, that's a really good question. And I'm curious as well on the outcome, by the way, of Wednesday Plus One. Sounds like a date night or like a dating, like interaction, but I'm curious about that as well. Yeah, I think, gosh, I certainly haven't solved it. I kind of am going back a bit to what I was kind of talking about earlier is, okay, who's the audience, like understanding that how people are going to receive any communication sitting at their house. There's no body language, right? Your audience is sitting, receiving an email, maybe they're on a Zoom call, really hard to read the room a bit. It's hard to read body language, right? It's hard for leaders to get that nonverbal feedback. And so I think the approach that we're attempting to be successful at is really understanding, okay, who's on the receiving end, take the fear out that Ricardo, how do we make this as the least scary as possible? How do we create this excitement and motivation? How do we create that and make it like, this is a really cool thing? And I think that some of that messaging, that's a real shift for some leaders. We all know leaders that have kind of led with fear, right? Like, it's a scary thing. So those leaders I've seen have to shift their approach and saying, okay, and how are we putting this out? So not everybody's good at that, right? Like, we need help from internal communication experts. I think that like, I'm not an expert on how to craft that message in a way that creates excitement and motivation in the right platform and the right forum, the right timing, right? Like, I mean, I think I've heard Ricardo talk about cadence and pace and how those things are. So we need help, not only from a group like Ricardo, but internal communications as well. HR knows the audience. I would say that's HR's job, right? You sit at the leadership table, but you have to know every level of the organization. Change experts are like, okay, here's how you set the pace. Communications is like, okay, this is how you get people on board, right? These are the different venues. So I don't know that I have the answer, but the answer is we need all of it, right? Like, we need all the resources available, I suppose, and people a lot smarter than any of us in the room. So.
Totally. I think you've hit on a few things there that are so important for us, and I think one of them, the biggest one for me, is ways of working. This kind of what we probably haven't done very well in across organizations is kind of just go, hey, over the past 2 years, this happened. And someone actually, Helen's reflected this in the comments here, and it's a really good observation. It's like, look, during the pandemic, people embrace opportunities to go, great, bigger talent pool. Let's hire the right skills. Doesn't matter where they work. We're all hybrid right now. And now we've got this kind of confused measures about getting people back into the office, right? Which is, great observation, Helen. And I agree. I think that's quite tricky. What we probably need to do to address some of that is say, this is the way that we work as business. We're across 5 time zones. So we've got 2 golden hours in the day. It's this time and it's this time. Plan your collaboration for those times. Guess what? If you're in the office and you want to collaborate with people remotely, that's cool. We've got virtual whiteboards you can do that on. We've got this tool and that tool. Just making it really clear and obvious to everyone what the ways of working are. And again, we're here to support with that as communicators. I think the other one is, and you touched on this, it's knowing the audience, right? Like, really partnering with HR to kind of go, we know where people are, we know where they're not, and we, and therefore, we can serve up a good choice of channels. So, and this has always been a bugbear of mine. We used to walk in the door, we don't anymore, and walk through the virtual doors of your office, and it's like you were transported 15 years in the past. Because if you scanned a QR code, you wouldn't get a very good experience, and you go, oh, well, I'm never going to do that again. Or, you try to log on and access something, it would, or search even for something, it just didn't work. That was a huge beef of mine as a comms person with a heavy bias towards channels and content. So I think, giving people the choice that they experience outside, and don't get me wrong, we haven't got the budgets of like Google, right? And that's okay. Like, we can do very well with the budgets that we do have. But being able to say to people, great, outside, you like to access your news on an app. Great, we have an app. You like to see things very, very quickly, like on Twitter. You want to see something on a screen? Great, we can do that. You don't have a work phone, or you don't want to use your own mobile device, cool, we can cater for that too. Giving people the choice is absolutely vital, because we're just not going to reach them if we don't do that. So I think that's important for us. And then the final point is personalization. How we can use those audience insights to partner with both change and HR to be, kind of front and center when it comes to reducing noise and increasing relevancy. And again, that's something I'm really passionate about. Why send out 55 emails when actually we can do it all in, one message, and just target those different audience groups, or hit the audience that really need to know that message. And for example, not bothering people who have already taken action. Employee engagement surveys are a good example for that. You send an employee engagement survey out, don't send a reminder to someone who's already done it. They've done it. They're fine. They're busy. They don't need another email. You're just going to annoy them. The next email they should get should be a thank you, and here's the results, and here's what's going to come next. So yeah, I agree with everything you said on that, Rachel. I am conscious of time, and I do want to get you guys to kind of crystal ball it. So let's do that. Let's go back to Ricardo. Let's look into the future. I guess the question, the kind of essay question I want you to answer is what do you think those HR and change trends and initiatives are going to look like over the next 12 months, 24 months? And then maybe I'll try and reflect on how IC can have an impact on those. Are things going to change dramatically, do you think, Ricardo? The things that are keeping you up now, are they still going to be keeping you up in 12 months' time?
Yeah, one thing I think is humans are incredibly poor at forecasting, right? So I'll use that as my caveat into anything I say as of this moment forward. It's funny you said, Andrew, we haven't, for example, and I saw in the comments, there's a lot of energy on the hybrid piece. And there's that view of, if you remember March 2020, what's going to happen? And eventually you start seeing the articles, back to work, this is what it means. And it's been now a few years on, and we still haven't cracked the code, as you said rightly. I don't think we will in the next year or two either, to be honest, right? As we found out these things we uncovered a lot, just like, you drain a lake and you find stuff at the bottom and you didn't quite know was going to be there, right? So, this, call it an experiment, although it quite wasn't, but in hybrid work uncovered some things around, underrepresented groups have a different orientation as to how they're seen or included or not in the workforce, in the office when they're at home or not. People who, might trend towards introversion, right, find themselves now having equal voice in some of these conversations. And if you look at many things around teaming, it's equal share of voice has a big impact on how well a team performs effectively, and the aggregation of team performance is organizational performance, right? So I think for the next couple of years, it will be a continued look at these things, and it's going to be you said customization, right? And especially when you think about an organization like ours, we have lab technicians, we have manufacturing and supply chain workers, and we have office workers, right? And each one of them has a very different context, and they're distributed around 90 countries or all around the world, right? So for us to come out with any given policy or any view of this is what the future of work will look like for everyone, as I keep saying, the one size fits none is really the way it works. So I think over the next couple of years, the big thing for me, I always go back to it's going to be data, and it's going to be the digital evolution that we've been promising for a while is going to continue to rise. And again, I mentioned Chat GPT, it's in everyone's tongue here from 3 to 4, how, we got the, 100 million users in a minute, in effect, right? So, these technologies, I think, are going to give us deeper, not only data, but insights, right? So we get from predictive to prescriptive analytics, and we're starting to understand and get closer and closer to sentiment, to really employee data in workforce productivity, right? And that's a tricky area to now wade into efficiency and productivity of your workforce, right? It gets very tricky, especially we talked about recessions earlier. So I think it's going to be just a closer view of our workforce, how it actually moves and impacts outcomes and business strategies, and enables companies to succeed, right? So for me, it's going to be all about the data, really.
Yeah. No, that's really good insights, Ricardo. Rachel, same question to you. Any reflections on what Ricardo said, and then also crystal ball 24, next 24 months, what do we think those issues are going to be?
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback actually a little bit. So I'm going to
That's good.
steal shamelessly Ricardo on a little bit of what you said about the evolution of technology and data and automation, I would say. So I think that those things will continue to change the way that people work and the way that businesses operate. Certainly I'm seeing that, we see that all the time here. Technology is getting faster, making jobs look different. So the next 12, I could even say 3 years, I think that initiatives will be, okay, this is what business look at. I would actually also add the state of the markets and what is the world doing? What is the world economy doing? And I think that work will continue to shift. Jobs will look different for people as technology and whatever, like I said, whatever the world ends up doing in terms of economy. And so I think we'll continue to see the change in restructuring jobs and how does that fit that? What does work look like to best fit the state of the business, right? So I think that can scare people. That can be a scary thing when in fact it's actually a really exciting thing. But I see that as a top initiative and on top of that, a little bit, I don't know if the softer side is the word for that, but Ricardo talked about culture, and I love the word belonging. I think that the pandemic what the workforce has made, the generations that are making up our workforce right now are so different. Oh my gosh. And, we had a lot of baby boomers retire during the pandemic. And now we're getting these recent college grads, and their expectations of work are completely different. Their values are different than, some of the people that are nearing retirement. Many of them are like, money, I want to have free time. I want to come to a place where I can have friends, and I want to be able to be myself and belong someplace versus fitting in. That's kind of been something that we've picked up on. So that's going to be a huge initiative, trying to keep up with everybody that's sitting virtually, metaphorically or physically in the office. I would say too that the workforce is changing in terms of what they want to do. Many people are not raising their hand for manager level roles anymore. And so how do you then grow those those career, and they can have really, really valuable career paths, but how do you continue to grow and develop those individuals and what makes sense? I'd say that I'm seeing kind of the new generation entering the workforce. They want personal development. They want they want the gym memberships. They want that extra stuff, which is fantastic because I kind of like that stuff too, to be honest. But how do you start to cater to them while also keeping in mind everybody else that's there? And so that's when I go back to the culture and making it a really good place that people want to come to and where people feel that they can belong. Again, in terms of personal, professional development, how do we manage those individuals and be really empathetic to what they're going through? Because it's certainly different than what I went through. So again, I would say the org changes due to everything and the way that work is performed and culture and belonging.
No, I'd agree with all of that. I think the Gallagher 2023 State of the Sector report was all about kind of internal comms saying our biggest calling now is culture and belonging, creating an inclusive place where people feel valued and energized. And I mean, that goes to show that the partnership between internal communications and HR has never been more important. But what's interesting, I think, from my observations is I'm seeing more and more internal communications functions reporting in through HR or the people team or people and culture teams, or whatever they might be called. So, we're seeing that play out. And I think it's a really good thing. I think it is tremendously important because I think the days of the kind of lifer, someone who, leaves college, university, goes into a business and stays there for their whole working life. I think they're gone. You know, they're gone.
Great.
So we need to think, if we want to retain good talent, it's exactly what you said, right? And it plays into what Ricardo's talked about as well. It's about investing in talent, giving people a reason to stick around in the organization. Listen, guys, we've only got 15 minutes left. I want to make sure, because we had loads of questions come in. So I'll hand back over to Suze to go through the questions in a minute. But I just wanted to thank you both. This has been a wonderful 45 minutes of conversation for me to kind of step back from the grindstone of work and have a conversation with two really fantastic and talented professionals. So thank you so much for your time. I've loved it. Suze,
Yes.
talk to us. Have we had many questions? What can we answer?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you all, our speakers, for joining us today. But before I go right into Q&A, I just want to throw out a quick poll to our audience. If any of you, if any of what has been discussed today really resonated with you and you want to dig into it more and see how Populo's platform can help you solve such challenges, we'd love to connect you to a member of our team. So if you're interested, type yes. If not, no worries at all. But we just want to make sure we capture this information.
We'll still answer your questions is what I think I'm hearing, Suze, right? You don't have to say yes to that.
Yeah.
It's good to know. There is such thing as a free lunch. This is good.
All right. Thank you all. So let's dive into Q&A. Those of you who haven't or typed in a question, but you have one, please put it into the Q&A panel. And we will get to as many as we can in these 13 minutes. So let's start with one that came in early on from Grania from Dublin. This is for the whole panel. In the midst of so many channels and technological solutions, what does this group here think of the old-fashioned way of doing town hall meetings and putting management face-to-face with the staff to get the message across?
That's such a good question. I'll start on that if I can, guys, because we wherever I've been in working in internal communications, the most trusted channel has always been town halls, whether they be face to face or hybrid or whatever it might be, business briefings, whatever they're called. Getting the senior leadership team to be authentic and have a conversation, direct with people, and then take Q&A afterwards. Always, we always get a good net promoter score out of those channels. We always get, fantastic feedback. And even if the messages are difficult, having that format allows us to be, really honest with people and also get the sentiment live and in the room. I think there's probably a way of bringing some of the modern tactics into play, whether that's a couple of pre-recorded features. Recently in our own town hall, for instance, we had our executive leadership team, all live presenting. We presented our OKRs for the year. This was in January. But we had a couple of pre-recorded pieces. We had a really great customer interview to kind of bring the voice of the customer in as well. So I think there's things you can do to kind of make it feel more modern, make it feel like one of those kind of magazine talk shows. But actually, I put great faith in that as a channel. We invest time and effort into making those really audience focused, and it pays off dividends for us. So that's my view on it. But maybe that is old fashioned, and maybe I'll be out of the job soon. But I think it's important as part of the mix. Yeah. What about anyone else on the panel on that?
I'll just jump in with a comment. I think it's a great option among others, right? Just like any multi-channel view. We just have to be careful of, not penalizing people in shift work who might not be able to get into a town hall, people who have joined the workforce and for whatever personal reason are unable to get in the office, and we're rewarding those that can show up face to face and penalizing those who otherwise can't, which, puts a little bit of a cut in the whole inclusion piece. So again, it's great to be able to do that as part of other channels. And yes, feel trust when you're standing right across from someone, right? There's a human connection to be had. But again, you have to ensure that those who are unable to make it for a variety of reasons have the same opportunity and experience to get that message.
I completely agree. You guys said it beautifully, Ricardo, all levels of the organization. Yeah, make sure you're getting the message across. You don't alienate, because that can feel really, that can feel really bad for people. So keep it very positive. Andrew, I love what you said about bringing in different forms of media and making it like fun. You know, numbers are great. We all really love numbers, but like, you know, we can all laugh a little bit too. I think that's important.
Absolutely, yeah. You got to bring energy into those events, and you know that's the fun of it. You know, if it's not a written email, right? Let's make it feel like a live in-person event. And I think, Ricardo, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, there's different ways of going about it. But my biggest challenge back to anyone planning these events is, you know, don't feel like it has to be one and done. You know, tailor it. We talked about tailoring comms across channels. This is a channel. You know, go out on the road, meet people who are, you know, frontline remote workers, whatever they might be. You know, let's go out on the road, meet them where they eat, and have those conversations for sure. Suze?
Yeah, that's great. I think, you know, town hall is one of the areas or one of the channels where the leaders can access their employees. So this is a great transition to this question from Catherine of Colorado. What are the panel's recommendations for IC teams to connect and get meaningful participation with C team members who have schedule constraints?
An interesting one, isn't it? Anyone want to
I guess my first thought there is who doesn't have schedule constraints? You know, I think back to my comment earlier about falling in love with the problem, right? I think, you know, at that level, you know, the two key things are managing risk and finding or creating value, right? So what is on the agenda for them around their concerns in managing risk? What's on the agenda for them about how we create value and how they're creating value in the marketplace, and align the agenda to that, right? So, I mean, we say that you want to see what people care about, look in two places, their calendar and their wallet, right? What do you spend money on? What do you spend your time on? And, you know, with the hopefully increasing transparency we see in senior executive groups and boards, we understand what's important to them, you know, and we have to align our agendas to them versus trying to figure out, you know, what we need to say, right? It's not, let me find a slide and then go speak. It's let me see what the problems are that they're facing and how I can bring in a particular solution. And for internal comms, you know, certainly the voice of the employee is one, and real access to the channel to distribute messaging around, you know, vision, clarity of strategy, et cetera. So I think it's just alignment on need and want, like many other things in life, I suppose.
Yeah, I agree.
I would just add on. Oh yeah, I would just add on to that. May be very clear and concise. Sometimes you get 5 minutes, you know, and that's okay. Yeah, you can deliver in 5 minutes. Anybody can. So be very intentional. Everybody. The other thing is everybody needs to eat. So, you know, utilize lunch. I don't know, breakfast, coffee. My God, is my love language. But you know, just like. It can be boom, here's Ricardo, bingo, right? Like make sure you're aligned with them. You're not pulling in your own agenda necessarily. Make sure it's aligned with what this leader is that you're trying to pin down. And just don't get, I mean, be persistent, right? It will come, but be ready for that 5-10 minute window when it does.
Yeah, I think so. The only thing I'd add is the and this plays into what you've just said there, Rachel. I don't think you go in with an agenda, and even, you know, when I started this role in October, I met all of the ELT, and I said, the executive leadership team, and I said, I don't want to have a comms conversation. I just want to have a business conversation. Tell me about what's happening in your part of the business. What does your team look like? And just have that conversation, meet them where they are. And then next time, you know, if you have that conversation again, you'll start to see the opportunities to kind of get more time on their diary and move yourself from kind of, you know, hopefully someone who's seen more as a strategic partner, someone who can add real value. And then it's just knowing them, you know, I think that point you said there about, you know, be bold, be brief, be gone, you know, that's fine. We need to do an elevator pitch. I remember when I was at Network Rail years ago in the UK, and I managed to catch the CEO in the lift. And we had 7 floors to go up, and I needed him to sign off on something. And I got it up on my phone there and then. He read it and signed it off in the lift. I was like, that's great. So sometimes you can't get the time, but make the time work for you.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. So what are some tips to engage managers and supervisors in communicating changes in the organization when they might not feel like communication experts to do so?
Such a good question. I have another bugbear of mine. I'm a very positive person, by the way.
Yeah.
Another bugbear of mine is we talk about, and internal communicators have done this for as long as I've been in internal comms. We talk about, managers need to be better at communicating, and we know it's a problem, but we don't manage to get the business case right to invest in them, to give them the skills that they need in order to be better communicators. Because as we know, some people, rise up the ranks because they're fantastic at their job. Doesn't necessarily mean they can communicate or contextualize the stuff we need them to. So it's a big bugbear of mine. And if I had the answer, I'd carry on talking. But hey, we've got Ricardo and Rachel here. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think super good points. I think giving them as many resources, talking points, basically hand delivering all that they're going to need. And sometimes you have to be that resource in the room to kind of fill in some gaps if they start to get nervous and anxious about it. But the more materials and preparation, so that they just have to stand up there and deliver and support. And I think that's key.
Yeah, so I think fundamentally there's another view here from me, and very often it's, hey, here's a message, pass it on, right? The conversation should be, here's the message, what does it mean for you? And then engage others in that conversation, right? So people, I think you mentioned it, Rachel, earlier, the what's in it for me of change, right? So if you're just asking someone to pass something on that they don't understand, believe in, align to, engage with, no script in the world is going to help them get that point across, right? If you engage them on, what exactly is this? How will it impact you? How will it create a better future or take away a pain or potentially deal with compliance, right? It's not always a positive thing. Once they kind of internalize that and can share it back in their own words and stories, for me, that's the most powerful change, owning the message beyond just sharing it.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think it's about engaging them earlier. You said that, Ricardo, yourself, but I couldn't agree more. The best thing we can do as a communications function is make sure that our managers feel prepared. There's nothing worse than us saying, if you've got any questions, please ask your manager. And then our manager comes back to us and goes, I don't know what the answer is. It's a terrible experience. So yeah, engage them early, make sure they understand and give them a voice.
Great, thank you. I think we have time for maybe one or two more. We'll see what we can fit in. What are the recommendations to improve reach with frontline or shift employees across many locations who don't always have access to digital devices?
I can answer this in 2 sentences really quickly from my side. Firstly, short form video. The more of that, the better. And when I say short form, I'm talking no more than 60 seconds to get the key messages across. And I'd say also another thing is digital signage. Getting that in the right places with, again, short form content that engages them and raises awareness on key topics, massively helpful. And then, yeah, whatever we can do to get them to use their own devices, magical.
Completely agree. I work at Cargill, had worked with a lot of shift workers. I completely agree, Andrew. There was Facebook accounts, like mass text message lists where you could shoot out text messages, because at break time, that's a great time to hit people. Everybody is like this, right? Everybody is on their phone. So you can have it playing at the TV. You can have it strategically placed, like Andrew said, at shift change, where do people exit and enter the production floor. So you said it beautifully.
Yeah, Rachel, I have one question directed for you. This is related to kind of remote work from home workers. Given the wide number of industries you serve, have you noted whether the work from home output of the workforce has increased or decreased generally or by industry?
Oh gosh, that's a really good question. I think, gosh, it depends on who you ask. But I would say that there is something to be said about the loss of connectivity with remote work. So I think that it depends on the position. There are certain positions that working remotely, output significantly increased because of the nature of the work that was being performed. Other positions that sort of rely more on the in-person relationship building, trust, influence, that's where I saw suffering. in the time we have. So
Makes sense. So we are at time. Apologies, couldn't get to some of the other questions, but they're so good. And this was such an engaging conversation. I want to thank our speakers today for joining us and giving their insights. I definitely took a lot of nuggets away from this. And I want to thank you to our audience that joined us. And we hope to see you on the next one. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
thanks,
Everyone.
guys.
Bye.